stopped years ago, Will. It stopped years ago.
He's a dissident.
A dissident.
Where are we? What would you like to
Unpatriotic
debate
behaviour.
today? Right, I'll tell you where I'm at. I've been studying the Brexit debate a bit, which I've tended to avoid over the last couple of years, because
Content over everything.
let me just try and clarify. I was in a discussion with some people on Facebook this week about the idea of another referendum. And there are some people who say they want a people's vote for a new referendum. And these were some left-wing people who were saying, love Corbyn, hate Brexit. And I said to them, what you're doing is you're tail-ending the Liberals and the Blairites who are raising the idea of another referendum in order to oust Corbyn. Now, I'm not saying that Corbyn's taken a particularly strong position. He's taken a pretty crap position on the issue. I'm not disputing that. There is a reason for that, and that is because of his own political dilemma. On the one side, you've got the right wing of the Labour Party who want to oust him and don't forget, in 2016, they used Brexit just after the election to try and oust Corbyn. Right? There was a coup d'etat, right? And they lost that coup d'etat. But now they're emboldened by the fact that British society is almost entirely polarised around the issue of Brexit. And to be fair, sorry, how are you, my friend?
Good.
Good.
I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about race and British society.
I will come on to that subject matter to the degree that I can, whilst not encroaching on your terrain.
It doesn't exist. They do a thing. Carry on.
So, the big dilemma that Corbyn's got is that Labour members supported Remain overwhelmingly, and Labour voters did not. In large swathes of the north of England and in elsewhere in Britain, Wales as well, many Labour voters voted to leave. In other words, primarily because capitalism is a system which, over the last 20 years, has, through the globalisation process, and the European Union is part of that process, through the globalisation process, left large swathes of the traditional working class living in shit conditions. I mean, some parts of northern Britain and the Midlands are not that different from Eastern Europe.
That's right.
They've been left behind. And it is in those areas where large working class Labour voting communities voted Brexit. Some of them on reactionary grounds, racist grounds, some of them not. Some of them just on anti-establishment, anti-Westminster, anti-European grounds. I believe it is false to label Brexit voters as racists. However, I opposed Brexit in the referendum campaign because I believed that it would result, regardless of whether that was the intention of the way that people were voting, it would result in a spike in racism and xenophobia.
Okay.
And I also believe, because I'm an internationalist rather than a nationalist, I also believe that inside the European Union, despite its limitations, despite its German-French control, that it is possible in the condition of that disintegrating entity to lay the foundation for something better. But on the other side, when the vote took place, I accepted that that was the mandate of the British people to leave the European Union, and therefore to date, I still agree that what should be done is to leave the European Union, not because I agree with it, but because that's how people voted. However, the question then comes up, which everybody knows, has been the argument for 2 years. What do you mean, leave the European Union? And of course, that petard, if you like, is what Theresa May has been hoisted on. Because she didn't know what she meant.
Yes.
She didn't have an argument. She didn't have a policy. And now she goes back to her own constituency. And let's not forget, Brexit was a Tory plan to appease UKIP and the right wing,
Yes.
who were whipping up hysteria on immigration.
Right.
In order to appease them, David Cameron granted the Brexit vote.
Right.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that it had nothing to do with Jeremy Corbyn. It had nothing to do with the Labour Party. Well, he has said, as I have said now, he has accepted that that was the vote which the British people took, and that to overturn that by a, political manipulation in Parliament would be to undermine the authority of democracy in Britain, and it would, in particular, which is a tactical question, it would undermine the Labour Party and its potential to win an election if we lose the vote or the votes of people who voted to leave the European Union and who are also Labour voters.
Right.
So we were stuck, and by a we I mean myself and Corbyn's team, as I consider myself in that sector of opinion in the Labour Party, we were stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I don't deny that. We were and we are in a difficult position. I do not agree with the stance Jeremy Corbyn has taken on the immigration question. I don't believe he should have said that means because people voted to leave the European Union, that therefore we have to accept that our borders will be more restrictive than before. I don't accept that's true.
Right. Okay.
Right? Borders are always governed. The
That's right.
accessibility
Yes.
to countries, the movement of people, is nearly always governed by the dynamics of the economy. If an economy is rapidly expanding, an economy will welcome people in. So it was before 2008. Don't forget, everybody was accepting at that time that we would welcome people from out, and everybody's, even the people who are the most virulent opponents of the European Union, they were paying the plumbers from Poland. They were happy to have Romanian builders. Of course they were. But of course, once the economy began to contract, and that followed the global, not national, the global economic crisis that began in 2008, which came from a crisis of profitability of the economic system of society. And that economic system of society, let us name it, it is a system whereby a few hundred companies in Britain, out of 6 million companies in Britain, control the entire economy.
Yes.
And the banks at the top of the pyramid
That's right.
of the economy,
Yes.
not only in Britain, but worldwide, they were the beneficiaries, one of plundering the economy and the economies by wealthy countries of poor countries, and inside wealthy countries and poor countries of the poor people, whether it be in America or Britain or Europe or the world.
Yes.
The banks and the major industries plundered the world. And then when they brought, or better said, when their activity precipitated the global economic crisis, they were bailed out, and we had the burden of bailing them out, thrown onto our shoulders and onto our children's shoulders. And that laid the foundation for a global movement to the right, a global movement to reaction, a global movement. What's his name? Bolsonaro, Donald Trump, Brexit, Le Pen.
Jair Bolsonaro.
Sorry, you said
Jair Bolsonaro.
Jair Bolsonaro. Thank you very much. I'll probably get it wrong again. When I get a name wrong, I get it wrong consistently.
I just know because it's
But never mind.
Portuguese.
Good. Now, that process of movement towards reaction is understandable. It's easy to understand. When people's pockets were tighter, when the economy was contracting, when growth rates were slower, then people turn around and say, how comes that person's getting money and I'm not? How comes that immigrant's coming over here and got a job and I haven't? How comes our community's doing badly, but London's doing well? How comes Germany's doing well and Greece is not? And the truth of the matter is, sorry? Of course, that's correct. And one of the only exceptions to the political process of moving to the right, of blaming the workers or the poor for the plundering
What should happen? You're an internationalist. You said
I am
you're
an internationalist.
So what's the difference between you as an internationalist and the globalist? What's the difference?
Right. Now, an internationalist, I am a socialist internationalist.
Ooh.
I spoke here a few months ago. One of the few YouTube videos that I spoke on that had a significant audience and had some impact was when I discussed the First World War. Because there was a huge hoo-ha for the anniversary of the 100th year of the First World War. But nowhere did they explain what the First World War was about, or why the First World War ended. What's that got to do with now? Everything. Everything to do with now. When people turn around to me and say, and you hear them arguing, Brexit, no Brexit, hard Brexit, crash out, the hysteria around Brexit, yes or no, has run right through the veins of our society. And yet, ask yourself this, whether remain or leave, ask yourself this, will the consequences of leaving the European Union or remaining in the European Union, will they be greater than the slaughter carried out by Britain and America in the war in Iraq? Is not the migration problem that caused panic in Germany and France and across Europe and was used by UKIP to whip up hatred to back the Brexit vote? Was that not caused? And the war in Syria, was it not caused by Britain and America intervening to blow up Iraq and blow up Afghanistan? Is not. The truth of the matter is.
That's the question. Because you're a socialist.
Aren't they the bankers?
I am not going to argue.
Aren't they the bankers?
I want to know this rubbish question.
I'm answering your question.
He's already answered it in the answer.
It's a good question.
I do not believe that it is a simple conspiracy. I'm going to answer. A society that we live in is governed by the economic structure that we are born into. Capitalism, the production of commodities for profit. Goods, I'm going to answer you, goods and services for profit is what mobilizes a funfair in the park. It's what mobilizes people to walk down Oxford Street. It's what mobilizes billions of people tomorrow morning to go to work to get a wage from their employer.
Is profit bad then?
Profit is a system of society, of organizing
Yeah, but is
society.
it good or bad?
At a specific stage of development, it is necessary.
Oh,
It
right.
is not necessary today
Can you
as
draw
the
the line?
motive force organising society.
Can you draw the line?
Instead of this,
Answer the
we
question.
should be organising society to produce for the needs of humanity. Half of the world earns less than $2 a day, while 8 people own more wealth than half of the world. 200 companies, 200.
Yeah, but
less
what's wrong?
less
What
than the
is wrong
number
with that?
of people
You're an
I will speak
internationalist.
to today. 200 companies.
Yeah, but what's wrong with that?
Monopolies and oligopolies.
What's wrong with that?
They do not function as free market entities. One sec. I'm trying to answer you. They look like you and I. Thank you. I like that. That's good. That's good. What do you mean they look like me? Oh, well, I'm half Chinese actually. I'm half Chinese. So half of me,
What's the other half?
my friend,
Is the other half Jewish?
my mother is German, my father's Chinese.
Okay. German Jew or pure
Not
German?
Jewish. It's not Jewish,
Huh?
it's German.
Oh, pure German. Okay.
I don't know about pure German. I believe, from what we hear, the longer term background is Slavic. But,
Oh, right.
but German.
Okay, right.
3-4 generations more likely to be Slavic.
Right, okay.
But on the other side, Chinese, from Malaysia, Chinese.
Yeah. A
Fujianese.
bit like Kalergi.
Now, is this white people responsible? It can appear to be white people responsible
Yeah.
because the ruling powers in the world are dominated by North European or America.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
And
yeah.
inside South America, they are dominated by the white ex-colonial elite
Right.
and their descendants.
Yes.
And therefore it can appear to be,
Appear.
yes, it can appear to be
Yes.
that the white people rule the world.
No,
It can
he's not
appear
white.
that way.
He's not white. He's half Chinese.
However,
He appears
the
to be white.
appearance,
No, he appears
the
to be white,
appearance
but he's not white.
is deceptive.
Yes,
Let me
that's
tell
right,
you something.
That's right. The appearance
Let me
is
tell you something. Years ago, in the 1980s,
Where would he fit in that?
IC6.
I was involved.
Yeah. IC6.
IC6.
Yeah.
I was involved
He's the same
in the
as Jews and
struggle,
Arabs. Yeah.
in the struggle for the liberation of South Africa. I was heavily involved. We used to send literature from overseas Marxist revolutionaries to revolutionaries in South Africa. One of the people I was regularly sending material to was Cyril Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa now is leader of the ANC. In those days, Cyril Ramaphosa was a lawyer and an organizer of the trade union movement. He stood on the same policies and the same ideas that I am talking about today. However, today, Cyril Ramaphosa is he got billions of dollars from being a leader, from one time being a leader, backing the miners in strikes against Anglo-American. Now he was in the pay of Anglo-American. Because he is black does not mean he is immune to the corruption of capitalist system. However, you are right that the white structure of capitalism, piss off will you? No music, over there if you want to play your friggin' music. That's the guy who disrupted the Commonwealth Games, ran into and knocked one of the leading runner over. Nutcase. Fully fledged nutcase. Now, so the question is, yes, you're right. The overwhelming majority of people of African descent, of Indian descent, Chinese a bit less now, but yes, also Chinese descent, South American descent, Native Americans, they are in the lower strata of society.
Correct. Chinese.
Fact.
Chinese rank higher than white people in terms of income in US households.
My friend, you forget. 600 million people in China still earn only about $2 a day. 600 million people.
Yeah, because they enslave their own population, man.
That's the point.
But what is
That's the point.
solution? Please,
Although,
as an
Are you saying it's the West?
although,
It's the
one
Chinese.
sec. Although the oppression of blacks, Indians, Native Americans, Native South Americans is greater than that of white people. If you look around the white world, I'll use the term,
yeah.
you will discover people who are just as oppressed as people, black people in North America. You'll find people, white people, just as oppressed.
Yes.
Now you find
You're
white
correct.
people in South America
Yes, you're
who are
correct.
oppressed.
Okay, you're right.
Young girls
What is the solution?
prostituting themselves
Yes,
on the streets
what is your
in
solution?
South Africa.
Yeah, all right, you're right.
White
All
girls.
right, you're right. But what is the solution?
They can go everywhere and claim it was there.
Yeah, but he's not white.
I agree with
Yeah,
you.
wait a minute.
I agree with you.
He's not white.
This is because of the historical trajectory of capitalism. It is because
Don't worry. What's the solution?
it is because
You're international socialist. What is the solution?
the dynamics of the capitalist development led to some countries, Europe, Japan, and the United States, to be the leading industrial powers by the middle or the end of the 19th century.
Yes.
And that was when the world was divided and cut up, as the Chinese used to say, sliced like a melon. That's how they divided the world.
Okay. So what's the
And
solution?
China, don't forget this, China in 1820 was the #1 power in the world. #1 power in the world. Highest production, most sophisticated technology, most advanced economy, most advanced culture. 1820, the most advanced in the world. And yet, when the British invaded China, bombed China in the Opium Wars, forced the Chinese to take opium, a century of humiliation was imposed on the Chinese
then the
people
Japanese did the
until
same.
1949. Yes, the Japanese did the same. I said
Why are you
Japan.
guilt-tripping the Westerners? Everybody
I'm not.
did it.
He is. I am explaining that capitalism is a class system. The dominant capitalist countries
Yeah, it is a
happen
class
to be Japan, I said, North America, and Europe.
Yeah.
And because of the historical juncture in the 19th century, they became the dominant powers. It was, however, there was a man, a brilliant scientist by the name of Joseph Needham. He wrote an encyclopedia. He was a white man. He wrote an encyclopedia.
Well, then you can't trust
It's called Science and Civilization in China. And in there he shows that nearly all the major inventions of modern society that laid the foundation of modern society came from China.
Yeah.
Even football came from China.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No, but many inventions, like gunpowder, for example,
Gunpowder came from China.
Ice cream
Printing
came from China. Yeah, tea came from China.
You
But look,
said-
the thing is, the Chinese invented it, and the Westerners developed it.
So the question was
When
this.
the- listen,
That's what I
when
wanted
the
to get on
Europeans
to.
came back to China
The
with
question
gunpowder
that
weapons,
Joseph
their
Needham
weapons
posed
were better than the weapons
right
of the
back
Chinese.
in the 1950s.
Yeah.
It's called the Needham puzzle. And it goes to the heart of the question. Why, given the fact that China was more developed than the West, why did the West overtake and introduce modern science? Because the West had capitalism first. In China,
So
you
capitalism
had
is good.
capitalism, small-scale capitalism.
So capitalism is good then.
Yeah,
Powerful.
Capitalism
Mike is
was
right.
dynamic,
Yeah, but Mike
capitalism was energetic, capitalism was powerful.
Communism killed 100 million people.
is right.
And
So
how-
what's wrong?
Okay, let us assume,
Killed 100 million people.
let us assume for a moment that your figure is correct,
kind of is.
or you're running away.
It's historically accurate.
So capitalism is strong.
I said let us assume. I was going to answer the question.
White
won't.
capitalism actually
No, answer
is
it.
strong.
Well, actually, I did my PhD on China, on contemporary China. I finished it this last year. And my analysis says that China's development now is entirely, or almost entirely, due to the fact, and I advocate this worldwide, it's due to the fact that China has got an economy dominated by publicly owned companies, by state-owned companies.
That's right. But now.
But it is for now
That's right.
that China, it is in the last 30 years, that China has raised more people out of poverty than any other country in world history. Not because of capitalism,
Why?
but
What is
because
it? Oh, because of
public
socialism.
ownership dominates the economy. Now that might sound stupid, because everybody knows that publicly owned companies in China are sclerotic,
What about
are
Cuba?
arcane, are slow moving,
What about Cuba?
do not develop quickly. Everybody knows that.
They have
And
raised
yet,
the working class.
still China,
Cuba.
using that economic structure in contradiction with the entire world economic theory, they have been able to raise the living standards and to create, in the last 30 years, out of the dust, they have created modern cities, 200 modern cities
Is that good?
with more than 1 million people.
Is that good?
200
Solution.
modern cities.
Is that
And they talk about migration in Europe. When 1 million refugees from the Middle East and North Africa come to Europe, it's a panic, it's chaos, it's impossible. And yet, Europe's economy is bigger than China. Yet China caters for hundreds of millions of migrants every year. Hundreds of millions of people move thousands of miles from the interior of China to the east coast of China every year.
China's
Hundreds of millions, 17
China-
million new
they're all
children
the
are
same
born.
culture.
China, this
They
is
share
There are
everything.
80
Is that good?
80
They're
million,
almost exactly the
80
same.
million Chinese
the same
who are
country,
physically
man.
Chinese,
disabled
that's right.
and reliant on support. 80 million, more than the entire population of Britain. And yet they do it. Why are they able to do it?
Because the public government.
The one-child policy no longer exists.
I don't know if you've heard the
Why
whole
are they
credit
able to do
system
it?
in China.
Let me
Of
just
the credit
explain.
system
One
that's going on right now.
final point I want to
Okay,
make.
go ahead.
Then I'll let you come back and challenge. Why is China's state economy, which individual companies are sclerotic, individual companies are less efficient than individual private companies, comparative private companies, but why is China able to develop faster than any other economy in the world? And
have
in
slave
world
labor.
history, India started at a higher position in 1979. Pakistan and Indonesia started at a higher position in 1979.
But they're allowed one child. They're allowed
It
one
is
child
because-
in China. They've got human
It
rights.
is because if this company is state-owned and is in mobile phones, China Mobile, and this company is state-owned and provides the infrastructure. And this company is state-owned and provides the roads. And this company is state-owned and provides education. And this company is state-owned and builds housing. And this company is state-owned and builds underground stations. And this company is state-owned and builds high-speed rail. The totality combined together is not the individual weak finger that can be broken. It is a fist, a powerful state-owned entity able to outstrip not only private companies inside China, but able to outstrip any other country in the world.
But what about the globalists?
China
What about the globalists?
nationalist state? What's pure capital?
What's that?
It's going to be right out there.
What?
Imagine how far China is going to go.
Well, we hear this. I mean, I have studied, to be fair, I have studied almost every contemporary book on China written in the English language. Almost every book. Certainly all the books on economics.
So you do agree with him?
And I can tell you this.
It's an ethno-nationalist state, and that's why they beat
There are
the globalists.
52 nationalities in China.
Yeah, and there's 1 million imprisoned Muslims as well.
Now,
Yeah, man,
I
don't you
do
know
not
about the
agree.
camps they have in China?
I will talk
for
about
Muslims?
that. I do not agree with the internment of Muslims. The reason they are doing it,
And forced sterilisation. Don't you know?
no, actually that's incorrect. Muslims are permitted
proven,
to have more children than ethnic Chinese.
No, no, once you've been in prison.
Muslims, sorry? Look, let me just clarify what this is. As far as my understanding of it is concerned, and I have read the main document presented to the UN about this question, as far as my understanding of it is, Chinese government, trying to answer you,
We're going
Trying
away
to
from
answer.
the original topic.
I'm just trying to clarify this.
He
I'll
said
return
you're
there.
an internationalist.
In relation to Xinjiang
He said you're a Google.
and the Uyghurs, as I understand it, the Chinese government thinks, rather than, and I don't agree with this, but this is what they think, rather than bombing the people like Britain does and America does, rather than bombing the Iraqis or the Syrians,
just enslave
in order to prevent, I'm just trying to answer.
You're blaming England and
In order-
America. No, I'm sorry, I just
In order-
right? All the other countries all blowing each other up, yeah? Everyone's greedy. Everyone's worshipping money.
another subject.
They're not
I'm trying to
worshipping
answer
the
a
right
specific
one,
question.
Jesus. Right?
They believe,
I say it is.
from an administrative and bureaucratic standpoint, not my own view, they believe that by training the Uyghurs to utilize modern technology and by raising their infrastructure, they will be able to win them over by educating them in technology, science. I do not believe it is accurate to describe it as gulags and concentration camps. I do have. That
You
doesn't
were
mean
meant
they're gulags and
Chinese giving
concentration camps.
civilization to us poor monkeys.
That may be the case.
Like
I
everybody
don't know.
except the Chinese are monkeys.
I'm
man.
saying
Chinese
to you
need to teach
how
us
their
to live.
psychology is framed around this question. It is a bureaucratic theory of resolving the question of the nationalities in China. I never agreed with that policy,
Talk about the
neither in the Soviet
credit
Union
system in China now.
nor in
It's
China.
basically like in
But this is what they're doing. That is not the same as saying what the BBC
They
says,
basically have
that they are
cameras
simply
everywhere.
interning and
They have the most
imprisoning.
developed
That's not
surveillance
true.
system in the world.
BBC
Written out,
Every single
the
you'll
BBC
notice this.
are fake news.
They don't mention that anymore.
BBC
Oh yeah,
fake
don't
news.
forget. And America interned,
People who lose
incarcerated,
credits lose the ability
tortured,
to travel.
murdered,
They're
slaughtered in
basically
Iraq,
prisoners
in
in their own
Syria,
home. They can't buy
in
shit.
Libya,
They can't do
right,
their
in
credit.
Afghanistan.
They
So
can't
they have
vote.
no
They can't
grounds
use the
to
internet.
argue.
They can't do
That
anything.
does not make China's
They're
policy
prisoners without
right,
right to go to prison.
but it does contextualize it.
Money's over here.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it does
It's-
contextualize it,
it's
the
the
method
credit
they're
system,
adopting.
it's the
I don't
cultural
agree
credit system.
with Stalinist methods. I believe
That are being
that the
used in China.
peoples of any country must be free to decide their own fate.
Say again.
And
What
of
did you say?
individual nationalities must be free to decide their own fate. That is partly why I accept that when the people in Britain
voted by a majority to leave the European Union, that does constitute a mandate. Now, I don't agree with leaving the European Union.
I do.
But that is what people voted for.
I do.
And so I accept
Can I ask
that
you?
decision.
If
However,
the
problem lies in this.
And we was in the EU, we wouldn't have a second vote. They would say tough shit.
The problem lies in this.
That is a bit. And at the end of the day, I stand up as a Catholic, or what I am, I stand up. At the end of the day,
Nobody-
EUs are running each other's countries, yeah?
Because our society.
Right. At the end of the day,
Well, I don't mind some interruption, but this is not a coherent
everyone says the EU, yeah? The EU. People voted out, people voted in.
One of the characteristics.
What I'm saying,
One of the
when it all got
characteristics.
voted out, yeah, we stay out. It ain't like a football match, you got to play, oh no, what, another goal. You got
One
to
of the
stay out as it is.
characteristics
And what I'm saying,
the last
it
2
ain't-
years, of the last 2 years,
But what I'm saying
is
you've got
everybody has had
other
something to
stores.
say,
Petrol.
and nobody who's got something to say has got any impact on what happens. Neither you, nor I, nor Theresa May.
Which begs the question,
None of
why
us-
are you speaking here then?
On the question of the European Union
No.
and Brexit.
means Brexit, man. Go on.
Exactly,
Brexit,
but it
Brexit.
doesn't.
Full British Brexit.
But it
Yeah,
doesn't.
but the EU's
Nobody,
been conning
whether it be
people.
Rees-Mogg,
Look, the Labour
whether it
Party
be
make
her,
white people slaves,
whether
they
it be
make black
Jeremy
people slaves,
Corbyn
but people
or
still run
Theresa
the
May,
Labour Party.
nobody
They must be
in Britain
cuckoo.
has any influence over the process happening. Nobody. That is why it's so frustrating.
But what I'm saying,
Everybody is rowing, arguing, reaching the point of punching
No,
each
but
other,
what I'm saying,
and yet they
the
have
politics are getting
zero.
richer and you're getting poorer. Well, can I ask you something?
No.
you've
You're
done
not.
You've done
You're
enough
not
talking.
helpfully-
You've done enough
I've been
talking.
speaking here 32 years.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
why I
okay.
get on a
You've been speaking here 100
platform.
years.
That's why I get on a platform
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
speak.
Right?
Right?
But you don't
I
like
get
a
on a
challenge.
platform and
You
speak.
don't like a challenge.
You weren't challenging me. You were shouting your view
No, but you're
at the same time as I'm shouting mine.
No, but people don't
Not
like to hear
a
the
viable
truth.
method of speaking in Hyde Park.
They are afraid of your voice, madam.
So the question then lies, and I do believe it is theoretically possible to engage the people of Britain in the decision of what happens. Not by a new vote, new referendum, but by a mass democratic participation and the creation of what I believe should happen. And that is when a society and a country is forming or reforming its relations internally and externally. And that's what's happening. Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Britain as a whole, Britain and Europe, all that's up for grabs. Everybody knows that. So the question is, what do you do in those circumstances?
Unity.
The history shows that in those circumstances, mass participation must find expression through some organisational form. What would that form be? A constituent assembly. A constituent assembly.
That's what Lenin
The
said.
election of representatives of the people, recallable to the people, with a mandate from the people
But we have a
to
mandate.
carry through. We don't have a mandate.
We had a vote.
We had a vote.
No. You've had a vote, but even the party that advocated that vote,
The Conservatives.
and the people who advocate leaving the Conservative Party, they have no agreement. They will not pass that deal. And therefore, you must admit that saying we've had a vote does not mean anything.
We leave by default at the 20th of March.
No,
On the
what I mean-
contrary,
what-
it is my belief, that the most likely scenario now,
No deal.
on the contrary, the most likely scenario now is that Brexit will be cancelled.
I don't
2
think it
years
will,
at
no.
least.
You know
The
what?
most
No,
likely
I don't think
scenario.
I will lead the
I
civil
think so.
war that starts
Because-
under the
Listen
Ukraine.
here.
Yellow West, Yellow West.
Listen
Not
here.
because I
No,
want
no,
to,
the
but because
EU
that's the most likely scenario.
The EU's been making people blind for many years.
Well, I'm
Talks to
saying,
Parliament.
here is a mechanism.
The politicians
I mean,
are
the fact
getting
that-
richer and
Oh,
richer.
shut up.
No, you don't want to hear the truth, my darling. Right? The
gentleman
EU
here said
countries-
something.
He says a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. I
Why
think you're
don't you
running
go
away
over
from the
there?
original
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, you go on, man. Go on. Please.
Why
don't you do it over there?
The question you raised is
For the people. Speak for the people. Master Heiko has been
stay here and I'll move. As you're
because
demanding.
you want to move because you don't want to listen to the truth.
I don't want to
He
listen
wants
to you.
move. No,
I
because
don't want to listen to you. Because you're not listening to anyone else either.
No, you've been here talking.
Yes, I've been doing that 32 years. I've been doing that 32 years. Go over there, see if you get an audience.
Start your own, I will listen to you.
All right, well, I'm
That's
sorry.
how Speaker's Corner is.
No.
You get up on the platform, you try and gather a crowd, and if you gather a crowd, good. If you don't, go and stay over there.
EU and Brexit.
This is
I'm going to move a little bit over
Yours
there
over there.
so that you understand what's going
What
on.
I'm saying,
I'm going to
everyone,
move a little
we
over
voted
there.
out the
Let's
EU.
go big,
right?
Can you hear
We
me?
stay
Can
here.
you hear me?
It's like a football match. You can't keep
You
saying
said that already.
Yeah, but you
5
can't
times.
enter the football pitch and start playing with the players out of nowhere.
No, but if you score a goal, if you score a goal,
Unless you're in the Uruguayan team.
what I'm saying.
Oh, please.
No, you do it.
Does anybody want her to carry on?
No.
No!
You get
Yeah,
that?
no, because what's saying.
No, wait, we'll hear you out. We'll hear you out. But let the guys speak. Let the guys
Let's have
speak.
a referendum. Let's have a referendum.
The majority for leave. I'm sorry.
You've got money.
Let's have a
referendum.
You lost.
Whether we want to leave.
Time
Right,
Just have a vote.
Even all the
The
other
majority voted for you to leave.
I don't care. What I'm saying, all the other idiots.
I'm respecting that vote.
All right, you know what? You're the loser, right?
I think this gentleman over here wants to speak to you.
You're saying, listen, at the end of the day, all the other
I'm
countries
moving a little bit further over
also
there. Please
voted
stay
that.
here.
Oh, let's stop there.
Voted that.
It is that.
Okay, let's hear the lady a little bit, just a little bit.
That's why no one's going to listen to you.
I don't.
Which I would have done if you started on your own.
I wanted to deal with the point you raised.
Right. So what
You
was,
said, basically, if the
if we scrap
if,
Brexit,
if
then
Article
everyone will
50 is
lose faith in-
cancelled,
then
then
we
you're
lose
saying
faith in
destruction of
democracy.
democracy.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. But on the other side, the
you're
fact
not-
of the matter
you're
is,
not
as I
valid
said
democracy.
already, there is nobody, from Theresa May to me, or to that woman there, who actually has any say of what's happening. Nobody.
What do you mean by that?
So, I mean by that, Theresa May has gone and made a deal, and it won't be accepted.
no, but the replacement.
That's the government.
But the government
right?
replacement.
You and
legislation-
I have been arguing about this for 2 years.
No, but sir.
And nobody
No.
apart from LBC listens to a fucking word you say.
No, but sir.
Nobody.
But by
They
default,
couldn't
the
give a
laws,
shit what
the
you
laws
say.
are repealed in the 29th of March. It would take an act of parliament to change the repealing.
The Parliament can just turn around and vote by majority to repeal the withdrawal.
Thank you.
They could do that, and they probably will.
So don't you think there's going to be a big
Now,
rebellion?
I believe the way out of that is actually to engage the population, the population, on a decision on what the nature of this changing relationship inside Britain and between Britain and Europe is. To let the people actually participate.
Re-establish the British Empire.
That means a constituent assembly. Ideally, a constituent assembly would replace the second house in Britain, which is unelected, the House of Lords. We could have a constituent assembly elected by the people to replace the House of Lords to decide on the constitutional relationship between Britain and Europe and between the countries of Britain, and also to draw up a constitution as to what type of society we want. Do we want a society in which there is full employment? Do we want a society in which education is free? Do we want a society in which there is a
It'll be shit
guaranteed
if that-
minimum
it'll be
wage?
shit education
Or
if
a
it was free.
guaranteed wage? Do we not want that society? Do we want Scotland to have the right to vote for independence every 5 years? Do we want to have the right to vote on referendum, on joining or leaving international organisations. All these decisions are decisions that the people in Britain have been discussing for 2 years, and yet nobody, neither you, nor I, nor Theresa May, nor Jeremy Corbyn, has had any impact on that process. Because there is paralysis politically. Society is so sharply divided on issues that are actually relatively peripheral. The real issues are the social and economic issues about how society is organised. Who gets the cake? The truth of the matter is, Europe is not a Europe of the people. Europe is a Europe of the German banks, German businesses, French banks and French businesses which dominate the whole of Europe.
45%
That is why Greece, Spain, Portugal and Ireland suffered catastrophic collapse. And yet when the Greek people voted against the deal given them by the European Union, they were strangled by the German central bank and the ECB.
Greece is a vassal to Germany.
But wait, you're agreeing with
Now
the lady over there,
Britain
no?
is not in the same position because Britain isn't in the euro. When the people of Greece voted to oppose the decision of the Troika, the European Central Bank just closed down the ATMs because that's where the euros came out of. And the people of Greece were forced to capitulate. Britain is not in that position. However, with Brexit or without Brexit, we are still ruled by a bunch of gangsters. By the elite
By the
who
bankers.
hang out in Mayfair and Park Lane, who hang out in the City of London, who lord over the world. Don't forget, the Cayman Islands, when there was investigation about the criminal money of the Cayman Islands, Britain is #1 in the world for money laundering. #1 in the world. The City of London is one gigantic, or better said, one small square mile where 400 banks money launder the entire criminal money of the world.
Yeah, that's true.
And utilise their power to plunder the world.
Heiko's right. Only a
And
nationalist
therefore
government
breaking down
strong nationalist
the
government.
power of the tiny elite which rule over Britain, and yes, the tiny elite that rules over Europe, that will give the people power. Power to decide what happens.
You know
The
why
truth
that
of the matter
happens? You know
is
why that
we
square
have no
mile-
power now.
You know why that square
The old
mile
one,
launders
just
all
one,
the money?
one final.
Yeah, I've been waiting
I'm
for like
really
half
sorry.
an hour
I
now.
do realize. I do accept that. I have one last train of thought, and then you come. Yeah? You'll have a fair crack at the whip. I promise. One final thought before I let Pavel come in. If there is not the cancellation of Brexit as it stands, and there is crashing out or the deal is accepted somehow by members of Parliament, the Tory government will fall sooner or later. And whether or not I was wrong, I believe, earlier last year when I said Labour will win a bigger vote than in the referendum. I believe Labour will not win a bigger vote. But Labour will still win a resounding majority in Parliament because the Tory vote will collapse. And because of the specific structure of the electoral boundaries in Britain, they are tribally organised, Labour or Tory. You will not get a massive swing to the Liberals. Even if the Liberals got 30%, still they will not take a majority in Parliament or a significant position in Parliament. Therefore, Labour will win a resounding majority at the next general election. And I have been arguing, and there's an interview I did with Jeremy Corbyn in 2015 where I discussed this question with him. You can find it on YouTube. Sorry? No, I did it long before that. I interviewed Jeremy Corbyn. I said, how do we engage the people of Britain in determining their fate? The national question and the democratic question. And he agreed with me, a constituent assembly, or he used the phrase, a constitutional assembly, he said, which is the same thing. I believe that is the only way out of the present crisis, which will actually involve the people in making decisions.
Okay, so
The gentleman here, to be fair,
just
many
a
times.
quick reference to the city of London. The money is being laundered in the center of London, in one district, just as you said. Not because we live in a capitalist system, but because that little district doesn't obey the same laws as the rest of the country. They have the same rules, but some of the rules are slightly different. And they use those little differences, to get all that money, to profit a lot from it. That's the real reason why it happens. But now, the real point I wanted to discuss. Have you heard about the credit system in China, the social credit system? It's completely abhorrent.
It's 1984.
I wouldn't call it.
It happens to be an exaggeration.
It's not an
It happens to be
exaggeration.
an
China has the best.
It could become a dangerous phenomenon.
It already
but
has
at the moment, it happens to be an
It
exaggeration.
has already become a dangerous phenomenon.
I've studied this question.
No, you may have studied it, but I
have
spoke
it.
to Chinese people, and I've studied
I'm
too.
happy if you friend me on Facebook. I'm happy to send you. Yes, of course you can. Heiko, not hard to find. Send me a connection, and any questions you want as evidential material would be quite useful for us in future to exchange data. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. Like a few weeks ago, I was saying something I know I was completely wrong about it. Oh, what it was I said a couple of weeks or 3 weeks ago, I said Britain has the worst housing stock in Europe. Now, I read a report on that, but having spoken for so long at Speaker's Corner, I mixed up my times, and this was back in 2004 or so. Now, Britain has the smallest housing, it has the oldest housing, but it is not the worst housing.
I've got a real quick one about the government changes. You kind of said we should have a People's Assembly. Why don't we just get rid of the whole government and just replace it with a Republican-style government where you have like a House and a Senate? Why don't we just overthrow the whole thing?
We have a parliamentary system. To argue to overthrow that parliamentary system, I think, is incorrect.
Bring the guillotine.
However, we could
Viva
supplement
revolution.
the parliamentary system with a more democratic second chamber. In my opinion, also the abolition of the House of Lords and the monarchy. And the monarchy, in my opinion. You may have a different opinion. Your opinion is equally valid to be argued. I will argue for the abolition of the monarchy. If we're going to have constitutional change, let's make it root and branch. And that means the abolition of the monarchy, the abolition of the House of Lords, and its replacement with a constituent assembly from the people, elected and recallable by the people at any time, so that they are mandated to carry out the will of the people.
A right of recall at any time.
At any time.
That would threaten stability.
Well, we've got electronic democracy today. Is it not instability now? Everyone is talking about the collapse of the world. I do not believe that if there was no deal on the 29th of March, that it would be the end of the world.
How about we
I do not. I lived in East Germany. When the Berlin Wall came down and the government collapsed, everybody said, oh my God, the world will collapse. Everybody will kill each other. They even let the prisoners out of prison. In fact, someone did try and kill me and came out of prison, but that was a side by side on the side. They came into my flat and smashed it up. So. But anyway, the point was, even the economy of East Germany, with hundreds of thousands of people leaving, with no government, from the period of November 89 until October 1990, the economy carried on. People were fed. There was no shortage of goods.
Same with Brexit.
And I believe, ultimately, it would be the same if there was no deal with Brexit.
What if we started
I believe there is hysteria on the part of the liberals, hysteria on the part of the elite, because they are basically hysterical people. They go mad when anything changes that upsets their position. Look at the way they had to go. Someone earlier on who doesn't agree with me, who's argued with me for many years, he turned around and said, I do understand what you're saying, because if you look at this discussion, was it last week or the week before, where Jeremy Corbyn was accused of saying "stupid woman."
He did.
I believe he said "stupid people."
Who says
But what you're
says
saying,
stupid people?
exactly,
So what?
exactly.
Well, if I
The
say
point
stupid
is,
man.
all
I
the
agree.
media,
Mr. May's a stupid
all the media,
Oh no, you can't call
nearly
women
all the
stupid. No, no,
politicians,
no.
all the pundits on television, they went hysterical.
Some men, some women are
Hysterical
stupid.
about
It's just how it is.
So the point is, one thing Donald Trump has shown,
Hail
above
Trump.
all else.
Oh, you're a Trump supporter now.
No, I'm pointing out the difference between real politics, which affect the people, and the politics of bullshit, of hysteria, of parliamentary machinations,
Fear-mongering.
But they still
of
affect
television,
the people.
and scaremongering. Is that Donald Trump can get away. He can say what the fuck he likes. Still, he doesn't lose his position. In fact, if he swears and shouts, if he says, "I'll grab a pussy, I'll bring down the government, I'll build a wall,"
We love him more for it.
people like him even more.
Yeah, because the guy is very clever at what he did. He used
Not
the media
because I
to
like
give
it,
himself
But
propaganda
because
for free.
politics is not
He didn't pay the
actually
media like Hillary
about
did.
the agenda which the elite, the billionaires and their mass media, they own the mass media, they control the mass media. It is not about what they say.
So you
That's
don't
why
think-
Trump is popular. He
Politics,
speaks for the people.
Lenin used to say,
I want to grab
He doesn't always
politics
speak
is
the right thing.
Probably spoke where
concentrated
you are.
economics. Concentrated economics. So the fundamental question of politics is a class question. That is why I stand by the principles of Marxism. Socialism means power to the working class. And when the workers have power, take the wealthy, take the power from the wealthiest classes, then they can reorganize the world for peace,
not their money.
freedom, and plenty. And yes, I do not believe, don't forget this, don't forget this, from 2 million years ago, up until 9,000 years ago, human beings had no borders, no countries.
No transportation.
They survived because they had tools, a hand axe. That's what they had for 2 million years. A hand axe
Let's go
was
back
the
to the good old
passport
days.
to the world.
What we call
On the
true
contrary,
state of nature.
on the contrary, rather than what you just said as a glib remark, here we have the modern hand axe. All of
Made
us
by
in
the free
communication.
market. Made by the free market.
All of us, on the contrary,
By the
the
product of
touch
capitalism.
tone, the touch screen was made by the CIA. International satellite communication and Wi-Fi communication was made by NASA.
By the US military.
Yeah, but
The chips were made by the military.
Needed another 7
So the idea it was made by the private sector is a lie.
the US
But can't
military
the
It was made by the government
Yes.
and state industry.
Yes, but the free
It was
market.
made,
The free market made it
as
acceptable.
Leon Trotsky
The free
said.
market made it accessible for the public.
Leon Trotsky said,
800 feet. Good army
This-
weapons.
The Iraqis weren't expecting the US.
just the same as this is the passport to the world. Leon Trotsky said, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. This is an instrument of war, made for war, designed for war, designed for two types of war. One is war between countries and economies. Two is war against the majority by the minority. Don't forget, last year, Mark Zuckerberg
Cunt.
was found out through Cambridge Analytica,
It was found out he was a robot.
manipulating the Brexit vote, manipulating the Trump vote.
For Trump
And that's
vote.
just a sideline company getting services
Why would
from
Facebook
Facebook.
want Trump in?
Zuckerberg
This
was
is
running a campaign.
democratic conspiracy
Zuckerberg
theory.
was running
At
a
its
campaign.
finest.
It was the Russians.
All the Russians,
Yeah, it was the
now
Russian
the
bots, man.
Chinese, Huawei. Why is Huawei the enemy?
no smoking
Because
gun.
everybody knows Huawei's mobile phones and Huawei's network systems are superior to Ericsson, are superior to Apple. That's why Apple's in trouble. Huawei's phones are better and cheaper. That's why. Now, the truth of the matter is, Mark Zuckerberg was taken down not just because of Cambridge Analytica, but because he was running a campaign to get elected as President of the United States of America. His wife was organising a campaign for him to visit 50 states in America in advance of him launching a campaign, using Facebook as the platform to do it, as President of America running on the Democratic ticket. So who controls the world?
The elite.
Not frigging me, not you, not Theresa May, but giant corporations seizing control of the resources of the world to run it in their own interests.
Well, this is how
we need real power for the people. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh! Oh, that's it? Oh, it's my turn.
Come take over everything from your humanity.
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
Different race.
Listen.
How can they get rich on that? Because you can't go and kill somebody you respect. You can't go murder somebody that you respect and understand. You can't do that. You can't do that. So therefore, the religious leaders must spread hate of each community to each other. Most Muslims, most Jewish, most Christians,